p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for the Yahoo Q&A here at, well, I guess that's self-explanatory, Yahoo. As always, I'm your host, John Daigle from Establish the Run, and this is the last one for just a couple weeks. No Q&A next Friday with the holidays, Black Friday, Bears play in the afternoon, 3 games on Thursday. You'll probably have to make a lot of your decisions before then. So this is it for the next couple of weeks, and then I'll be back ahead of Week 14 for most likely for a lot of you, either fantasy playoff Q&A or perhaps the last week before your fantasy playoffs. So those questions are even more pertinent as we attempt to make and squeeze our teams into the postseason. Also, you may have seen that I was on the live recap show this past week with all of our friend Matt Harmon, then turned around my waiver wire column at Establish the Run, where Justin Boone also does his waiver wire column on Yahoo, and we do cross-reference each other. Don't let them tell you otherwise. We both respect each other's work, and we just like to see where our blind spots are. So we both have our own processes. The waiver wire was shockingly active this week for Week 12. As I'm sure you even saw Justin write about. Emmanuel Wilson at the top, even though it seems like that one's going to come down to the wire. Josh Jacobs does seem, after practicing all week long, that he could play, but the team also could just very easily decide to instead sit him and allow him to play on Thanksgiving on Thursday, since that game is far more important than this one. You need to beat the Lions, of course, since the division race is wide open, with the Bears being up top at number 1 seed. So Emmanuel Wilson, Christian Watson, who shouldn't be available anywhere, but was just and Bashal Tutin, of course. So just a very packed waiver wire this week. But some questions already rolling in. We can go ahead and get into it ahead of Week 12. And that is Surish. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Very excited. A fun Thanksgiving slate, too. If you haven't seen those 3 games, potential for a shootout across the board. Worried about the systemic risk of the Packers falling apart without Tucker Kraft, as we've seen so far. But against the Lions, indoors at home in Detroit, that's going to be fun. Not to mention the Chiefs indoors on the road against the Cowboys that are playing better defense, by the way. At least through one game with Quinnen Williams. That should be fun. And then, of course, there's a wide range of outcomes for the Bengals offense, especially since they all really hinge on a 40-year-old quarterback. And as you saw this past game, if a 40-year-old quarterback falls apart, everyone falls apart for that offense, which is a little bit concerning. We, of course, are waiting on Joe Burrow to see if he's actually going to play as well. But, yeah, fun Thanksgiving slate. And Surish, beyond that, asks, needs 1 wide receiver, 1 flex, between Devonta Smith, Chase Brown, and Emeka Egbuka. It seems once again that Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving will be out. Very unclear if it's a matchup that the Bucs can win, since Baker Mayfield really has turned back into a normal fantasy player that's not worth starting every single week. Last week was a tough matchup, obviously, against the Bucs, because the Bucs, in terms of passing points, Davis Mills threw a couple touchdowns, but honestly, like, no one really did well, because the Bucs or the Bills, what they do is they play dime, 4 cornerbacks on base sets. So they already start with a stout pass defense. That's one of the reasons why you can run on them easily. You can also run on them easily because they have no athletes and they're slow in their front 7. So just a simple defense to attack on the ground, but hard to pass on. Even then, Emeka Egbuka still led the team in targets. So in this case, I'm going to go Chase Brown as an every touch running back. Without Samaje Perine, with him dealing with that high ankle sprain, it really has brought Chase Brown back to his previous 80% plus workload with barely anyone else touching the ball. Not to mention Chase Brown also seeing targets, and that's how you beat this Patriots front seven. You can't run against them. Chase Brown won't be efficient, but the two highest scores against them so far, Devon Achane and Bijan Robinson, those guys got there because they had 8 catches apiece. Chase Brown can have 8 catches with his role in this game. So you're just going to take those touches every time. And then you're going to take the target share of Emeka Egbuka. It's a great spot for Devonta Smith, by the way. And it really comes down to nitpicking, because either way, it's one of those questions, Shurish, where regardless, you're going to leave a good player on the bench. Like, whatever happens, Devonta Smith is a good play and Emeka Egbuka is a good play. So you try not to worry about it since, again, either way. But I think the range of outcomes for Devonta Smith's a lot wider, and that we've seen the Eagles fail on offense a lot of time. Having said that, it is a game where it's a signal for Devonta. Last week, we talked about how it was an easy signal for A.J. Brown, who Kevin Petula is a very ignorant and non-progressive play caller, where we can predict his offenses easily. The Lions are a top 3 team in man coverage, for example. A.J. Brown has the 4th highest target share against man coverage. So last week, we knew that A.J. Brown was going to get all the targets. Easy. Done. And that's what happened. This game is not that, as even with Quinnen Williams available for the first time on Monday night against the Raiders, the Cowboys played zone on 90% of their snaps. And so I think it's quite easily a game where we know the ball is once again going to go towards Devonta Smith. Having said that, the target share and just the entire offense bringing him down, the odds of that happening for Emeka Egbuka are much lower than the Eagles and Devonta Smith. So we're going to go Egbuka easily. Nadeezy, Justin Jefferson, or Emeka Egbuka. And for me, it is still Egbuka for as long as J.J. McCarthy is playing professional football. We've really seen him basically make Jordan Addison unusable. T.J. Hawkinson was droppable 2 months ago. T.J. Hawkinson shouldn't be anywhere near your roster after the first month. But Justin Jefferson, we know what to expect now. It's going to be a 30% target share of inefficient targets, and the passing offense is really capped here. So not really a situation I want to be involved in when you have a better player. And in this iteration of the Vikings offense, Emeka Egbuka is a much better start. Ricky Pearsall or Alec Pierce, also Mayfield or Brissett. And for me, I do think, I'm going to check my rankings. I feel like I have Brissett ranked higher. Yeah. I don't even have Baker Mayfield as a QB1 this week. And I have Jacoby Brissett as a top 10 quarterback comfortably. I don't like to chase unsustainable results. And that's exactly what happened with the Cardinals last week. Jacoby Brissett, an NFL record, 47 completions, 450 plus passing yards. Michael Wilson, his 180 receiving yards were the most for any player this year. Not just him, but like literally the most receiving yards for any player in the league this year. Obviously unsustainable, but another great matchup. Just because the Jaguars are a run funnel defense or pass funnel, and that you can't run the ball on them at all. And so we expect it to once again go through the air. And what's fun is that the Cardinals have really become the Arizona Bengals, and that they'll get you there in garbage time every single week. Like they get trounced on 28-0 in the first half against the Seahawks a couple weeks ago. The last week, they go down 29-10 before the fourth quarter against the Niners. But they just still throw the ball and do a lot more things under center that opens up the offense. Jacoby Brissett has made Trey McBride a significantly better player than Brock Bowers for fantasy the rest of the way. Trey McBride has the usage that we dream of. So, yeah, Jacoby Brissett just in this game script is a much better play than Baker Mayfield. And I do like Ricky Pearsall. That game's going to be fun. And Brock Purdy should be picked up wherever he's available. For instance, the Panthers are generating pressure at the league's lowest rate. And Brock Purdy was actually at full strength. I was surprised in his first game back. Last week, from a clean pocket, since we mentioned the Panthers not being able to pressure quarterbacks, Purdy went 15 of 19 for 2 touchdowns when kept clean. We just think that the Niners are going to do whatever they want and put up 30-plus points on the Panthers with ease. And Pearsall in that game, I know he came away with just 1 catch for 0 yards. He ran just 1 fewer route than Juwan Jennings. Like, I think he's back at full strength as well now. So a good chance to start him, but you're not going to start him over Alec Pierce, who's quietly become the Colts wide receiver 1 over the past month. So Pearsall is a good start, but not over Alec Pierce. In a standard league, start 2 and flex 1. Lots of good options. And in this case, between Rashee Rice, Emeka Egbuka, TreVeyon Henderson, or T. Higgins, I am going to bench TreVeyon Henderson, unfortunately. Don't want to, but again, this is what happens whenever you have many good players. If Ramondre Stevenson is out, which it doesn't seem like, it seems like he's going to be limited and be active, which makes it a much easier situation. It does become harder. So much so that I probably start TreVeyon Henderson over Egbuka if Ramondre Stevenson sits. Otherwise, though, in a committee, it's no question. You have to start Rashee Rice, obviously, who's still the wide receiver 1 in expected points because his usage is so good. You have to start Emeka Egbuka, and you have to start T. Higgins without Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase really hasn't missed any games, but the one time he missed a couple seasons ago, and T. Higgins started without him, 140 yards and a touchdown. We know T. Higgins is already like a wide receiver 1 who lives in the shadow of Jamar Chase being the better player, but that doesn't mean T. Higgins is not like an elite wide receiver if he were ever to go anywhere else. That's why they re-signed him to a wide receiver 1 contract, because he is naturally a wide receiver 1. He just plays behind Optimus Prime. So like, you're easily starting T. Higgins without Jamar Chase. So unfortunately, although I'm excited to start TreVeyon Henderson everywhere, TreVeyon Henderson does not have a place in these start sits and that roster. Would you flex Judkins or Brian Thomas Jr.? I'd take a chance on Quinshon Judkins over Brian Thomas Jr. I don't really want to get involved with Brian Thomas in his first game back from injury. I understand some people might. They have no choice to. I just don't know what to expect with Parker Washington last week. Only 2 catches for 20 yards. Still led the team in routes run, though. Jacoby Myers popped up, and then Brian Thomas Jr. trying to fit in the mold somewhere. I'd rather see how it all shakes out as opposed to starting Brian Thomas Jr. when he, in his first game back from the ankle injury. So I would rather take a chance on Quinshon Judkins, since we know the Browns are going to be in a competitive, if not win that game, even with Shadur Sanders, because Myles Garrett is going to win Defensive Player of the Year based on this performance on Sunday. The Raiders, we saw, even against the Cowboys, and don't get me wrong, Quinnen Williams is a monster. He was Pro Football Focus's number 1 interior run defender with the Jets all year long because he's a beast up the middle. He comes in that game. Ashton Jeanty totals, not averages. Ashton Jeanty totaled 2 yards before he had contact against him, against the Cowboys. Like, in my opinion, that could have been, for sure, the Raiders' offensive line. But in my opinion, the Cowboys' defense, at least in terms of the running game, is just no longer going to be a slouch the rest of the year. It's no longer the layup we thought we had whenever we projected our running backs against them. And so, Myles Garrett against that offensive line for the Raiders, he's going to have 5+ sacks. He's going to win the award single-handedly on Sunday. And I talk about that because I think the game script's going to be favorable finally for Quinshon Judkins. Now, Judkins himself has been bad. He's been very inefficient the past month, as if he's already hit some kind of rookie wall. But again, we're talking about that, guaranteed touches, or Brian Thomas Jr. trying to earn targets. I just take the guaranteed touches since the other options are so flimsy. All right. Arthur Young is fighting for a wild card spot. So everyone send him your spirit. And he wants a start between Odunze and Emmanuel Wilson. And it is very easily Emmanuel Wilson if Josh Jacobs sits. And if Josh Jacobs plays, it is very easily Rome Odunze. Emmanuel Wilson has 0 value 0. If Josh Jacobs plays, because he's the more important player. So that's an easy one, Arthur Young. But we also saw when Jacobs was injured last week, Emmanuel Wilson came off the bench for 100% of the running back touches, 93% of their snaps, and a 73% route rate. So he is an every down back we want to use if Jacobs is out. Very easy. Take it to Sunday morning. And that's not even to say, like, I have faith in Rome Odunze in a cold weather game against a Steelers defense that really has come around the past couple weeks. They've shifted Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar to safety as like two players who can play everywhere. And I'm not comping them to Kyle Hamilton. I'm not saying those two guys are in their class, but it really helps to have, this is kind of like the evolution of NFL. And I think defenses and just in general teams may be figuring this out moving on. It really helps just to draft chess pieces. You just draft dogs as opposed to positionally trying to set players, because like the versatility of Kyle Duggar and Jalen Ramsey has really turned everyone in the secondary and the Steelers pass rush into a great unit as opposed to like forcing them elsewhere. So the Steelers like have turned the corner on defense for a reason, similar to the Ravens now moving Kyle Hamilton as a chess piece around and not really giving him a position as well. And that makes the Steelers secondary and defense as a whole scarier. So it's not like I have faith in Rome Odunze. It's just the fact that Emmanuel Wilson literally is unusable. Like he shouldn't even be on a roster if Josh Jacobs plays. But if Josh Jacobs is out, Emmanuel Wilson is a top 12 running back. So you just let Jacobs' availability make that decision for you. Jose Avalos asks, start 2 at wide receiver between A.J. Brown, Michael Wilson, Yoshi Voss. So I think as a player who doesn't earn targets, I understand the Yoshi Voss play, but it is still thin when you're talking about like actual good NFL receivers. Again, I don't like to chase unsustainable results, for example, like in Michael Wilson, but it's a great matchup to chase. Like not only talking about the pass funnel Jaguars, but the Jaguars are also allowing the most fantasy points to receivers from out wide every week. And out wide is where Michael Wilson led the Cardinals in routes run as their leading target receiver. So it's very easily, without Marvin Harrison Jr. available again this week, to say, Michael Wilson, you're the wide receiver 1 against the team allowing the most points to wide receivers outside. So you start Michael Wilson, and then it comes down to, like, just say it out loud, Jose. A.J. Brown or Andre Yosibas. You've said enough. Of course, you're starting A.J. Brown, and the results could be bad, but who cares? Because you're never starting Andre Yoshivas over A.J. Brown, despite Yoshivas stepping into Jamar Chase's role, but he is obviously not Jamar Chase. We're not replicating or saying that at all. So you just start A.J. Brown and hope for the best. Hope that game shoots out. It's indoors. You know, it's a different matchup because remember last time in week 1, Jalen Carter spat on Dak Prescott, got kicked out early. That really changed the game plan for the Cowboys. They instead could lean on Javonte Williams. But perhaps we get some more push from Dak Prescott, who's played well. And only the Jaguars are allowing more fantasy points to receivers from out wide than the Cowboys. So you got a chance at least with A.J. Brown. And we know if the game shoots out, A.J. Brown will be a part of it. So you just cross your fingers there. Would you drop Tony Pollard for Chris Rodriguez? If you need immediate points, Chris Rodriguez is a better starter than Tony Pollard. Obviously not this week because the Washington Commanders are on bye. But if you need a stash, Tony Pollard is better than Chris Rodriguez. So it just depends on your roster, Millie. Like you can't start either Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears, but you also don't want to drop them ahead of the fantasy playoffs because if one were injured, the other one then becomes like a top 24 back. So Pollard and Spears are really just like the hellscape of fantasy football. You can't start them. You can't drop them either because they're good stashes. But if you're desperate already, everyone has a different roster. Everyone has a different league. Everyone has different scoring settings. So you answer it for yourself. If you need immediate points, Chris Rodriguez. If you don't, and you're not starting Chris Rodriguez immediately, you stash Tony Pollard instead. Should I drop Quentin Johnston to stash a backup RB? And you have Chase, Olave, Pickens, and Wandale. Quentin Johnston's upside is better than Wandale, so I'd rather drop Wandale personally, who really just continues to be a possession receiver, just a slot receiver who is not going to win you anything in the fantasy playoffs. He offers a floor, but once the buys are over, we're not really looking for floors. Everyone failed this past game, of course, against the Jaguars because Justin Herbert got injured. Nothing to see there. You just throw it out the window. But I would drop Wandale before Quentin Johnston because we've seen Quentin Johnston's upside as recently as a couple weeks ago. Would I drop Harold Fannin for Strange? No, because I think Harold Fannon's ceiling, if the dominoes were to fall correctly, even from Shadur or Gabriel, is higher than Brenton Strange's. Given all the moving pieces, Strange, remember, also played without Jacoby Myers, so just lots of moving pieces there. I'd rather hold Fannin, not even start Fannin. I'd rather hold Fannin in case David and Njoku were injured. Do I think ETN sits because of injury? I don't know. I genuinely have no idea. I don't think so, but I don't know. Either way, if he plays, him and Bashal Tutin, assuming Tutin also plays, are really good starts against this Cardinals front seven that has just fallen apart to running backs. Both ETN and Tutin are worth starting. And both have multiple touchdowns in their range of outcomes. What are my thoughts on Bucky long-term? I have no thoughts just because I don't know when we're going to see him. Like everyone else, I have no idea. It could be never again. Could be the 2026 season. It could be week 13. No idea when we're going to see Bucky Irving. And so at this point, because you would be selling him so low, I think he's a hold. But it's also a case-by-case basis in that maybe you can't wait for it. And so if you're a team who is scratching and clawing for the playoffs, having the good stashes for the playoffs doesn't even matter because you're trying to win and make the playoffs. So if that's the case, I do think guys like Bucky Irving are tradable. But because you're trying to win, you're not just trading them for anything. You're still trying to make the postseason and get starters back in return. So you can dangle them out there and try to get a starter back that helps you immediately if, again, you're a team fighting for the postseason. But if you're a winning roster, I'm just going to hold Bucky because you won't sell him for what he's worth at all. And again, I don't know when he's coming back. No one knows. At this point, nothing would shock me. 2026 would not shock me. Week 13 would probably be more shocking than 2026 at this point. But all the photos of him at practice, in my opinion, are just AI until we actually see him on a field. I do not believe he's going to play at all until we see him. All right, one, Jaime. Achane for Dart and Dowdle. I have Brown and Singletary. No. Okay. So no. If you have Chase Brown and Singletary, I'm thinking this means, Jaime, that you also have Devon Achane. And if you trade Devon Achane, you're starting Rico Dowdle instead. And Rico Dowdle is a top 12 running back this week, a great spot, as the 49ers defense has just collapsed across the board. Not to their own faults. Like, they haven't done anything wrong. They just lose a different player every single week, which is why they've plummeted to 32nd, dead last, only behind the Panthers in pressure rate. Everyone does what they want against them, including the Cardinals last week, including Bam Knight. But in a must-win matchup when you're 7-4, trading Devon Achane, just say that out loud, doesn't help you at all. Now, if you're trading Dart and Dowdle for Achane, I would do that. But this suggests you're trading Achane, and you'd be starting Chase Brown and Dowdle instead of Chase Brown and Achane, and I don't want to do that at all. So I'm taking Achane, who was on bye. I get that. But gosh, just to let him go. I don't know who your quarterback is either. So I don't know if Jackson Dart helps you at all. Because remember, Dart, I believe, has already been rolled out this week. I don't think Dart is playing this week. So I'm going to say no. I understand what you're getting at because you have to win. But I'm going to say no. I don't think this helps. Thoughts on stashing Darren Waller? Yeah, it's fine. I mean, no thoughts really. But we saw when he was available, he was a top 5 tight end because he had multiple touchdowns in his range of outcomes weekly. That's who they like to use. Unsurprisingly, this is for his career inside the red zone. And so, sure, stash Darren Waller in case he comes back. I have no opinions beyond that. I don't know if he comes back. I don't know if he gets injured again, if he's the same player when he comes back, but stash Darren Waller, sure. Why not? Flex Parker Washington or Bashal Tootin. I would flex Tootin instead. We saw the takeover before Tootin suffered an injury last week in the second half. But prior to that injury, Tootin had outtouched Travis Etienne 15-12, and he also outsnapped him in the first quarter and the first half. It is clear they were wanting to use Tootin more to the point where he could overthrow Travis Etienne entirely in the second half of the season in December. So Tootin, in my opinion, is a really good start if he plays, regardless of Etienne's availability. Over Parker Washington as well, because we are guaranteed those touches. Start Judkins and Tracy or hit the waiver wire. I just don't think, Maine, you're going to find anyone else better than Judkins or Tracy on the waiver wire. Tracy was a timeshare, but Devin Singletary did get 6 touches inside the 10-yard line and 9 inside the red zone. He obviously has some favoritism going back to Buffalo with Mike Kafka whenever they played together, when Kafka was the OC there. So Tracy isn't a timeshare, and he's fine starting, but he just doesn't have the touchdown upside we thought because Devin Singletary is used in that role. I just don't think you're going to find any waiver wire running back. If Tootin's out there, Tootin's a better start than Tyrone Tracy for sure. Again, I just don't know what's out there for you. Sean Tucker as well. If he's out there without Bucky Irving, Tucker's a better start than both Judkins and Tracy this week. So if those guys are out there, sure. All right, pick one between a lot of running backs. And if Josh Jacobs is out, Emmanuel Wilson is a better start. Otherwise, I'm starting Sean Tucker over Bashal Tootin and Alvin Kamara this week. Devon, lots of wide receivers. Pick 3. Marvin Harrison's out, so that's an easy one to eliminate. And I'm eliminating A.J. Brown from the bunch of the others, given Stephon Diggs' matchup, Tetaroa's matchup. Like, we had a lot of start-sit questions for Tetaroa last week, and I answered sit him, and I still think the process was correct. Like, apologies if that hurt you, but whatever. Tetaroa was worth sitting last week, and then all of a sudden they change his usage entirely. He plays the slot more, and that's important because now the last 2 games, Tetaroa has run 25% of his routes from the slot, and the slot is where the Niners have allowed the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So it's a great spot for Tetaroa this week. And then, obviously, you're playing Puka Nacua. So, to me, I'm going to take Diggs and McMillan and Puka over A.J. Brown. You could start. Everyone would argue it differently. A.J. Brown over Stephon Diggs. But the matchup for the Patriots, who are going to do whatever they want, Drake May especially, against the Bengals is so good that I'd rather take the exposure to Diggs than A.J. Brown. But I think other people would answer that differently. It's really subjective whether you want Diggs or A.J. Brown. I would take Diggs because I think his floor is higher. Purdy or Brissett? It's Purdy for me. You're leaving a good quarterback on the bench either way, but at the top of the show, I talked about Purdy's matchup. I'm definitely starting Purdy, who's back at full strength. Flex. Jacoby, DJ Moore, Tajee Spears, or Rashad White. God, that's all ugly. I think it'd be Jacoby Myers for me, just given how drowned out the other options are, with really no potential to stand out among their teammates. So I'm just going to take Jacoby Myers as the best worst option. Drop one. Chris Godwin, Quentin Johnston, or Alec Pierce. It's Chris Godwin for me just because we don't know if he's coming back this year. And when he does come back, we don't even know if he's going to be playable, since even when he came back from injury earlier this year for 2 starts, he was unusable in those 2 starts. So very easily Chris Godwin among that group. Rest of season is really hard, but especially with Joe Burrow, because we just don't know when and if he's coming back. Like if Joe Burrow were to come back, I'd say Joe Burrow, but then that leaves you without Brock Purdy for so long, right? Because you might have a 0 at quarterback. And so it depends what you need. In a vacuum, I'm going to say Joe Burrow rest of season. Otherwise, I'd take Brock Purdy over Justin Herbert rest of season. With Dart out, would you play Lawrence, Love, Shuck? I'd play Jameis, first of all. I'd play Jameis, Christian Watson, Josh Jacobs. I play Jordan Love, and then Jameis, and then Trevor Lawrence. We talked about Jameis last week, how Matt LaFleur and the Packers, they run a blend of zone coverages on 75% of their snaps, and Jameis is not a zone coverage guy at all. He showed that last year. He plays Jesse Minter's Chargers defense. He gets absolutely wrecked. But then he goes on to play the Broncos man coverage defense, which the Lions are that, and playing roughly 50% of their snaps from man coverage. That's what they do. And Jameis blows them away because he's the kind of guy who looks up, he sees you one-on-one, and he throws the ball downfield. He lets you beat them. So with the Lions playing man coverage, it is a better spot for Jameis Winston in a shootout. So I like Jameis Winston this week over those guys. Love and then Jameis Winston. Start Tootin or Luther Burden. I'm going to take the touches with Tootin. I love Luther Burden. I just don't think this week is the game script to start Burden whenever you have better options. Burden is a great stash. 23 routes to Olamide Zacchaeus' 7. We got the usage, on-field opportunity that we wanted. It did not come to fruition, but we got what we wanted. So now you can stash him as a potential ceiling play for the rest of the season, but I don't want to start him here. Genty or Pearsall at flex. I actually believe it's going to be it should be Genty. The safer offer is Genty. If it were my team, I think I'd take Pearsall. Just say screw it, because I'm so unsatisfied with Genty in this matchup. But Genty is like the only running back running routes. He has a safe floor because of that, but I don't expect him to do anything on the ground at all. So like the smarter start, you should start Genty over Ricky Pearsall. But I am not smart. And I also am much more prone to risk. Like I don't care. I just do the process and whatever happens, happens. I don't mind losing if I think I'm making the better start personally. And so if it were my team, I would start Pearsall over Genty. But you should not do that. The safer option is to start Genty. You should start Genty. I personally would not. But you should. Because I don't understand your risk tolerance. We don't know each other. And I don't want you to be sad if Genty outscores Pearsall, because I would not be sad. I would be happy I did not start Genty. So you take it on yourself to answer that question. Seahawks defense with KC defense. I think it's still too early for that. It's the time of the year where we're about to get a plethora of backup quarterbacks under center, and we can always just start them with ease. We can pick up any defense off the waiver wire and play them. So I'm not really a stash defense kind of guy. Also, the Seahawks aren't really a stash defense. Seahawks are a defense you start every week, and thus if I have the Seahawks, I'm also not stashing the second defense. I'm trying to pick out better options that could stumble into opportunity, elite opportunity with an injury. So I don't think I'm stashing the defense. I have the Seahawks behind them. Thank you, Devon, for being here every week. Relic asks, lots of wide receivers. Should I trade Tetaroa for Trey Benson because you have CD Pickens, Waddle, Egbuka, and Brian Thomas? I don't hate it. I'd rather, among all these, try to trade Pickens or Waddle over Tetaroa. I mean, I'd personally rather trade Brian Thomas Jr. I just don't think the other manager is probably taking Brian Thomas for Trey Benson. But I'd start there. And then I would go Pickens or Waddle. Gosh, they're all good options. And then I'd probably try to trade Waddle next before I get to Pickens and Tetaroa. But I'm going to slowly go down the list of seeing what that manager wants for Trey Benson, because I definitely want Trey Benson for the fantasy postseason, given the Cardinals' schedule. And more importantly, remember, the one start we saw for Trey Benson against the Seahawks, Amari DiMercato was their pass-catching back still alongside Benson. But Amari DiMercato just suffered a high ankle sprain. We don't expect him to play or even be available for the next 3 weeks. So if Trey Benson returns immediately this week, we think he's an every down running back for the next month over Bam Knight with the easy fantasy playoff schedule. So I definitely want to try to trade for Trey Benson. Addison or Pierce? Easily. Alec Pierce. Easily. Jordan Addison. It just sucks with J.J. McCarthy. He's become a flex option in shootouts. I don't think this game is going to be a shootout with McCarthy, a divisional game. It sucks because Addison we saw what he could do with Carson Wentz, but J.J. McCarthy can't carry 2 receivers. He's not good enough. Flex 2 between Burden, Tootin, Monangai, and Corum. Yeah. Rams, Bucks. You can't run on the Bucks at all. Monangai's in a timeshare with DeAndre Swift. I think it is Burden and Tootin just because they're better options over Monangai and Corum. That's it. Start 2. Emeka Egbuka, Chris Olave, Breece Hall, Tyler Warren, Ricky Pearsall. I'm pretty sure it's Egbuka and Chris Olave. But just look at what the Falcons allowed for the Panthers. Chris Olave is like the hero this week that's not getting talked about. He's in such a great matchup. Breece Hall, terrifying matchup with the Jets this week. Tyler Warren and Ricky Pearsall are good starts, but I do think Emeka Egbuka and Chris Olave both have top 12 ceilings. And I can't say that the same for Ricky Pearsall. And Tyler Warren is what he is. He offers a high floor. He's a safety net player. But, yeah, Emeka Egbuka and Chris Olave are just in great matchups this week. So I'm definitely going to start those two among these questions. I'm so stuck. Alec Pierce or Wandale. All right, we're just going to rapid fire these because these are easy. Definitely Alec Pierce over Wandale. Definitely. Drop Shaheed or Moore. I think you mean DJ Moore. For Chris Godwin. You could drop DJ Moore for Chris Godwin. Well, I guess you can drop DJ Moore for Chris Godwin because you're not using DJ Moore most likely. Shaheed's role may grow for the rest of the year. But also, again, Chris Godwin may not play, and you can't start Chris Godwin when he comes back until you see that he's actually healthy. Otherwise, it could be a dud like it was in his last 2 starts. So you're just trading problems when you trade DJ Moore for Chris Godwin. I don't want Chris Godwin on my roster. It's kind of the same player. So you can if you want, but I don't think it's necessary at all. You can probably just keep DJ Moore because if Rome Odunze's injured, DJ Moore still has a higher ceiling. He has a contingency value. And then, if you're asking me, I can't tell, but Rachaad White over Kyle Monangai. Tootin or Warren, I'm assuming Jaylen Warren. Yeah. I'm assuming Jaylen Warren, since there are multiple Warrens, there's Tyler Warren here as well. And if that's the case, I'm going to play Bashal Tutin just because I don't know what the timeshare is going to be with Kenneth Gainwell spiking, with Jaylen Warren suffering an ankle injury, and then Kenneth Gainwell coming onto the field being the RB5 on the entire week with 2 receiving touchdowns. And by the way, now the 2 games Jaylen Warren has missed, Kenneth Gainwell was the RB3 in Dublin against the Vikings. Week 4, I believe it was. And then last week, the RB5 on the week. Very clearly, Kenneth Gainwell is a top 2 player to stash everywhere for the fantasy playoffs in case Warren misses. Because if Warren misses, the running back usage, since either Mason Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers, neither of them can throw downfield, so they pepper the running backs with targets. Backfield usage for the Steelers is so good that Kenneth Gainwell is like one of the best stashes to have for the fantasy playoffs everywhere. But you're not going to start him if Jaylen Warren plays. I think in this case, we just don't know Warren's usage off an ankle injury, so we just play Bashal Tutin. Analysis of Chris Rodriguez. Yeah, he's fine. He's not really a stash. He's more of a player you're going to pick up and start if you need. But also, he's a player where you probably have better running backs over Chris Rodriguez easily. And so if you don't need a running back with immediate points, then you're easily glossing over him, because I also don't think Chris Rodriguez has a winning ceiling we care about. So you'd rather have Bashal Tutin, Emmanuel Wilson, Kenneth Gainwell, Ray Davis. You'd rather have all the backups, Chuba Hubbard over Chris Rodriguez. But there are teams that need usable points, and if so, that's where Rodriguez is the better pickup. But I don't think it's a ceiling we care about. Crazy to drop Jordan Mason for Brian Robinson. I mean, all you're doing is trading stashes, right? And we saw Jordan Mason is usable, but Xavier Scott was also the receiving back. Brian Robinson also, I don't think he'll be the receiving back if Christian McCaffrey were ever injured. I think everyone's getting that confused because he wasn't that in Washington as well. I think they would activate Isaac Guerendo to play that role, and Guerendo is far more explosive than Brian Robinson. I think it'd be a committee. But you can have Brian Robinson over Jordan Mason. That's fine. Mason's just a stash anyways. That's all you're asking is trade this stash for that stash. Also, by the way, the top 5 stashes, running backs, you should have ready for the fantasy postseason. In no particular order. Just check your waiver wire. R1 may not be a stash and he's rostered everywhere, but Zach Charbonnet seems to be trending that way since they're talking. Kenneth Gainwell out-carried Charbonnet 16-11 last week. He's used at the goal line in 2 of the last 3 games, and they're talking about Kenneth Gainwell more involved, seeming that it's trending towards Zach Charbonnet being the backup there. But like Tajee Spears and Tony Pollard, you can't drop either Walker or Charbonnet because we know the other is a top 12 running back if the other guy were injured. So keep them stashed everywhere. So Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, Kenneth Gainwell, Blake Corum in place of Kyron Williams. This was always in question to open the year, but they literally do not care about Jarquez Hunter whatsoever, who's more of a dynasty stash ahead of next year. Blake Corum is the player to roster, whether you have Kyron Williams or not. Bashal Tutin, I talked about. Tyler Algier is another one because if Bijan Robinson were to go down, Algier would run more routes. We've seen also he has the goal line equity there as a very good runner. Remember, Algier led all running backs in yards from scrimmage over the last month of the season a few years ago before they drafted Bijan Robinson, whenever Algier was playing with Arthur Smith. So we know Algier is literally an elite running back 1. And then also Ray Davis. I know everyone thinks the backup to James Cook is Ty Johnson. That's not the case at all. It's just one of those situations like Keaton Mitchell where Justice Hill can be used behind Derrick Henry because they have a role. Ty Johnson excels at pass catching. He has a role on third down as a satellite back. But if James Cook gets injured, as we saw last year, Ty Johnson's role stays the same. Justice Hill's role stays the same if Derrick Henry's injured because those guys can't handle 20 touches. That's what Ray Davis is there for, to be James Cook, again, as we saw last year against the Jets when he had 20-plus touches and 140 yards from scrimmage with a touchdown in the one game James Cook missed. So Ray Davis is still also a player to roster everywhere in case James Cook is injured. A couple rapid fire before we get out of here. Sean Tucker or Trey Benson? I don't even know. Is Trey Benson even active yet? Also, with Bucky Irving out and Trey Benson's first game back from injury, I do like that Trey Benson is going to be back, but I'm not going to play him in his first game back from injury. We just don't know his usage and how healthy he is. So I'm just going to easily say Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker, to me, is a great start without Bucky Irving. And as we saw, remember, this is the second time in the last calendar year that Sean Tucker has actually produced an overall wide receiver or RB1 finish because he's just talented. He pops up. He's a good prospect, too. He pops up whenever they use him more. Alec Pierce or Christian Watson at wide receiver? That's a nitpicking question since both are good plays and we're not going to get it right. I think I'm going to start Alec Pierce just because that game does have the highest total of the week. It's still Steve Spagnuolo against Daniel Jones on the road, so it could go really bad. Also, again, it's a good matchup for Christian Watson, too. It didn't happen for Rome Odunze this past game, but the Vikings allowed at least 12 fantasy points to wide receiver ones they faced in every game post-bye, and at least 18 points to true wide receiver ones like Amon-Ra, Ladd McConkey, A.J. Brown. So it's a really good matchup for Christian Watson. But again, Alec Pierce or Christian Watson, I think I'm going to take the game environment and cross my fingers that Daniel Jones doesn't turn into a pumpkin and play Alec Pierce. Because again, you're nitpicking here. They're both like fringe wide receiver twos. Marginal point difference. And with that, questions are done. I will leave you. Good luck in week 12. Have a happy holiday since I won't see you next week, but I will be back ahead of week 14, Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, where we can talk about the fantasy playoffs then. So good luck this weekend. And remember, until then, be a little bit kinder than what's required. I'll see you next time.